Good morning, everyone. So we're thrilled to have you all here, and we all just introduced ourselves. And what we're going to do is let's say a few words of introduction, and then we're going to move right into our panel. And so you can see on the chart here, I just want to say a couple words about the Rutgers Institute for Corporate Social Innovation. I've been my entire life a learning and development person. I believe in learning as the key. I'm passionately connected and committed to building a leadership for the future. I'm incredibly inspired by our students and the possibilities that they represent. And we also believe that business has a huge role to improve the world, and that's why we're working this initiative through the business school, and we'll talk more about that. Next slide. So just to remind everybody, this is the agenda for today. We're going to be moving into the panel in about 5 minutes. We're thrilled to have Leslie Hirsch talk about the Department of Labor and all their initiatives. Ann Wu, one of our corporate partners from Samsung, who will be sharing about their CSR and other wonderful initiatives, especially in this space. And we're thrilled to have Ram Venkataraman talk from Ernst & Young, Managing Director, talking about some of the cutting edge initiatives at E&Y. Then at 11 o'clock, we will be breaking into 3 breakouts. Some of you, a few of you signed up for a particular one. You'll also have the opportunity to choose again today which one you want to join, or if you don't want to choose, we'll randomly assign you to one of the breakouts. John will be facilitating a conversation, and we have some really interesting questions on portable individual training accounts that he presented about last time, and that seems to be a great area of interest, and people are very excited about helping to formulate that. Sam, who's quite the expert from One Huddle, CEO and founder, will be talking about technology's role in making reskilling accessible and equitable, which is one of our main goals here. And I, as a former HR person for 30 years, am right in my sweet spot talking about defining the skills that are needed for the future of work. And I have some resources and some really interesting questions to help move that conversation forward. Then we'll be doing readouts and next steps all by 12 o'clock. So just to remind everybody, as Edith said, this work is on the shoulders of the wonderful work that the students did last summer. We have a major report, which is on that link, on the future of work after COVID. We've established this working group, and with our emphasis on equity, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the skill development needs of all stakeholders in society, based on social responsibility, sustainability, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So what are our purpose? What we're trying to do here for the next, through the end of the year, is to basically analyze the current situation in the US, as well as specifically in New Jersey. We have a ton of resources that we've posted, excellent resources. Deborah will walk you through that a little bit in a minute. And we want to look at it both medium term, 3 years, and 10 years, long term, critical skills. And I don't know if you all had seen, I'm going to talk about it in my group, this incredibly interesting report that was done by McKinsey on this defining the skills citizens will need in the future world of work, based on a survey of 18,000 people in 15 countries. Highly recommended, even if you're not in my group, that you take a look at it. It has some really interesting findings and recommendations. And then thirdly, how do we get these pathways to people? What are the needed skill development paths? What are the barriers? How can we make it accessible to all? And ultimately, what we want to do is provide viable solutions. So we have one viable solution that we're working on, which is the portable individual training accounts. And we will be identifying some other viable training, some other viable solutions. Okay, so just to reorient everybody very briefly, RIXI has a methodology. I actually have 4 blogs that will be coming out in the next month, one on each of these with examples and explanations and conundrums and paradoxes. I just finished the 3rd one yesterday, which I'm very excited about. So we want to ground this conversation in our RIXI model of potential solutions. The first one is giving back to society. So this is where we focus on strategic philanthropy, CSR, and corporate volunteering. The second one, which we will be focusing on in our next meeting, is all about aligning profit and purpose, which incorporates purpose-driven leadership as well as shared value, B Corps, and those are examples, not everything. So there's other things that we need to include in there. And the third one, which I just mentioned, is all about responsible business practices. So this is where sustainability comes in, ESG, environmental, social, and governance, paying a living wage, and diversity, equity, and inclusion, and stakeholder capitalism. So if you can imagine, I wrote one blog covering all that stuff, which previously I had written a book about, but we got it into sort of the current state of where are we right now, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And finally, advocacy. So advocacy has a lot to do with what we're talking about with the portable training accounts, because we're talking about public policy and advocacy, appropriate advocacy. So at this point, I'm just going to ask Deborah to briefly, before we go into the panel, just take us through real quickly the table of contents that you've put together with our Google Drive, because I want everybody to see, and actually Maria just said, like, where's that McKinsey report? So she can explain that. Go ahead, Deborah.
Thank you. So first of all, good morning, everyone. As we've been saying, we've created this Google Drive, which is an online repository of a variety of different resources that we've had, which are all related to this reskilling initiative. So the way we set up this folder and this table of contents is there are 6 main folders. The first is for the Future of Work Symposium, which includes the report put together last year by our student task force, as well as a student presentation and a summary of our Future of Work Symposium, which we held in March. So this folder is pretty much the basis that led to the creation of this initiative. Our second main folder is the Reskilling for the Future Working Group, in which you can find the foundational document that was written by Gina, John, and Sam, as well as the presentation and the meeting notes from our initial meeting on the 23rd. This folder will then be updated with the information from today's meeting as well, and with future meetings as well. The third folder is probably the most comprehensive, and it's where you will find, for example, the link to the McKinsey report and other reports. So we titled it just very general, our research articles, and in here you'll find a subset of a lot of different articles. So every single article that we've created a separate folder for their source. So you can see, for example, we have an article by the Employers Association of New Jersey and the Ethical Corporation magazine. We've uploaded 2 different issues from them. We have a variety from the Harvard Business Review, the McKinsey reports, the New Jersey Business and Industry Association, PwC, we've uploaded a lot of their information, Rutgers Business Review, so the World Economic Forum. And so here it's really an easier way for you to navigate the Google folder, so you don't have to go through all of the research articles. If you know that you're looking for one in particular, you can just click on that link and it'll take you directly to the article that you're searching for. And of course, this will be uploaded and updated as we add on more resources. Our next main folder is Technology's Role in Reskilling, in which we have some articles that were provided to us by Sam on the importance of technology and the role that technology is playing in this initiative. Our next main folder is for the portable individual training accounts, in which we have more information on those accounts. And our last main folder is for the New Jersey government documents. I won't go too much into this main folder because we actually do have representatives from the government on the call. And Leslie will be on the panel, and they're the experts in this field, and I'm sure they'll have much more to share about this, as well as more resources. But this is just a really high level overview of our table of contents, and all of this can be found on the Google Drive. And of course, if you have any resources that you would like to share that you think might be beneficial for the group to have, please feel free to share them with the RIXI Director account or to Gina, and we will upload them as well.
Fantastic, Deborah. So I just want to say, I've read almost every one of these documents. It's amazing. Makes your head spin, but there are some themes, and we welcome you to submit your specific areas, and we will create a folder for you from any source, and make sure we keep it organized and up to date, and Deborah's doing a wonderful job of that along with everything else. Okay, any questions about that? I saw there were a bunch of chats, but I didn't have time to read them. Let's see, are there any questions? Great resource. Okay, so we'll look at these chats and make sure that we follow up. We'll save the chats as well. Okay, so we're going to move now to the next slide, and then probably stop with the slides, and we'll just have the panel. So basically, we have a panel now with Leslie Hirsch, the Assistant Commissioner from the Office of Research and Information, New Jersey Department of Labor, Ann Wu and Ram from Samsung, and Ram Venkatraman, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Managing Director, E&Y. I've had the great pleasure to work with several of these people, and let's move into the panel. Okay, so let's pull up the panel so we can see the panel. I see Ram. And there's Leslie. And we just need Ann. And there's Ann. We're all together. Okay. Would each of you like to just briefly introduce yourself? I already, kind of said your organization, and then we'll get started. You can unmute yourselves. Everyone else should be muted, please. Okay, Ram, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hey, what a great morning, right? I think, good morning, everyone. Ram Venkatraman from Ernst & Young. I'm a managing director in the People Advisory Services, primarily focused on the future of work and the reskilling aspects. So I'm happy to share more of those coming in. And I also would like to touch upon some of the pillars that Gina had mentioned during some of these panel discussions.
Wonderful, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And Leslie.
Good morning, everybody. I have not that much to add that I won't be covering, but I will say I'm a generalist at the Department of Labor. But my career over the past 25 years has really been focusing on poverty alleviation in particular, and it's crossed a number of disciplinary lines. So I feel a great, brotherhood and sisterhood with those of you who are here on the call, because I think learning is one of the most powerful paths out of poverty. And, obviously things are a lot more complicated than that. And I think we're going to be touching on a good deal of those topics today. So thanks so much for having me here.
Fantastic. And Ann.
Yes, good morning, everyone. I'm Ann Wu. I lead corporate citizenship at Samsung here in North America, but I have counterparts all across the world who are talking about the future of work as it relates regionally as well as on a global basis, and just the role of technology in all of that. So so excited to be part of the discussion, both from a local sense as well as a national and global perspective.
Fantastic. Thank you. So I have a warm-up question just to get us started here. And that is, presently, millions of Americans say they can't find a job, while many thousands of employers, if not more, say they can't find workers. What do you think accounts for this mismatch?
I'm happy to jump in, and this is probably the one that I have the most thorough answer for, the warm up. So I think we're in topsy-turvy land right now. Most of us know that, or are familiar with something that's called the Beverage Curve. And if you don't know the technical name for it, generally speaking, when unemployment is high, that job openings tend to be low and vice versa, right? There's an inverse relationship between those two things. And right now, what we've got is fairly high unemployment still compared to prior to COVID, and also a high number of job openings. So what's going on? Well, first of all, one of the things that's going on is that's a national statistic. And when you look at regions of the country, I think you'll find, in the South, for example, and in the Midwest, unemployment's a little bit lower, and guess what? Openings are higher. So the Beverage Curve is actually applying in regions. And where we are right now, we have openings that are not so high, not that many openings. We've recovered more than half of the jobs that we've lost, but we still are down by around 40% of the jobs that we lost in that first couple of months when COVID hit. So, what we're really looking at is slow matching. I mean, I think that's the term that Professor Wurtenberg, the situation she described. So a couple of reasons I would say on the worker side, a lot of people moved into areas that have a lower population density. Thus, they don't have the same jobs that they might have had or the jobs aren't available that they used to have when they lived in a denser population. We're also, we're pulling apart in the labor market where we have a lot of low-skill jobs and a growth in high-skill jobs that require a lot of digital skills. And so, I think to some extent, what we're looking at is people who are looking for jobs are mismatching to those two. They're somewhere in the middle, or they don't want to take those low-skill jobs or low-wage jobs, I should say, not low-skill jobs. And then I guess that gets us to the employer side, which is the elephant in the room, UI benefits. Everybody wants to talk about that. John and I don't want to do this without nuance, but I will say that early on, early data on the states that ended benefits as sort of a counter proposal, we would suspect or hypothesize that people have unemployment benefits. They don't need to go back to work. Well, on those states that ended employment benefits, all the statistics are moving in the wrong direction. So it's still early. So I would hesitate to actually use that as evidence, but I think it's interesting, and it's a wait and see situation until we get more information. So that's not the answer. Although it is providing a cushion, unemployment insurance is providing somewhat of a cushion for people who were really unhappy with their work. I heard a thing on NPR, many of you may have heard it yesterday, about the droves of people leaving leisure and hospitality. I think the estimate that was given was something in the range of 1 million people across the country. I think a recent survey from ZipRecruiter cited that 70% of people in the leisure and hospitality sector are looking for a job in another sector. So, it's a typical low wage sector with unpredictable schedules and also some health risks of being around people. So I think that's a really big piece of why people have a little bit of cushion, concerned about their work lives, low pay, high risk jobs. And then we all know, I was on that women's roundtable a couple of weeks ago. Hopefully some of you have seen that childcare is the huge issue right now. So I think a lot of parents of school-age children are waiting to go back to work when their kids go back to school. And parents of younger children have the absolute worst case scenario, which is scarce childcare and unaffordable and very, very expensive childcare. So those are, sorry to go on so long, but that's my longest answer of your questions.
That was a fantastic analysis. And I was very intrigued to hear what you said about the early data, that maybe it's not just, the unemployment benefits. I was at an airport recently in the United Club, and everyone, 3 different groups around me were all talking about nobody wants to go back to work. Right. Okay. Ram or Ann, did you want to add anything to that?
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
I can quickly add. I mean, it was very comprehensive. Leslie, I think she covered it all. There's nothing new topics I want to add, but I want to endorse some of the things with my recent business travel. United Club was one where they refused accommodation because out of 4, 1 was closed, 2 were closed, too many people in there. And the hospitality industry that Leslie mentioned, it's true. I saw that in the real on the ground. The hotels came and said, hey, we change, clean rooms only once in 3 days. Shortage of people, restaurants closing sooner. I mean, I saw this, it's not the way it was before. And it is so true that million plus transition is happening. The other aspect I would also say is just add on, from an employee or a human being perspective, people have had some time to step back. There has been some soul searching, and people have said, hey, what am I doing? I don't want to call out an industry like airline or restaurant or a hospitality industry. They're saying, what if something else comes in and I'm stuck? So this is time. A lot of people I have interviewed, or we did about 16,000 employees survey. It has come to note that people have done some soul searching and looked at some reskilling themselves. And that is probably causing that gap. And the talent movement has been the highest in decades. I think what we are seeing, retention has become an issue again in many organizations, including EY. So I mean, it's all coming to light, and there are in one way people are reskilling, and the other way people are looking at jobs. So I think that's the mismatch. It's a great question.
Excellent. And Anne, would you like to add anything?
Sure. I think that everything that Ram and Leslie said, is apparent both on a micro level. When you go to a restaurant and they're closing a couple of hours early, or someplace you think you want to go to or visit, they're just, and it's very day to day sometimes too, right? So like I had a childcare issue yesterday because they closed because they didn't have enough people. So the dependency happens at a very micro level and a macro level as well. I also think that there's, certain sectors that are booming and others that aren't as much. And so there's a bit of a, when you look sector by sector, where the growth is happening is very skewed as well. And so, on the topic of reskilling, I think it's really important to both ramp up people on certain skills that are really needed in the marketplace today, and just understand what the wraparound sort of traits and areas of expertise and talent that can match around it. From as a tech company, the technical skills that are that we need as a company have changed even over the past 5 years. And the future direction of where we need to go, it's really hard to hire. We hire globally for jobs because, country by country, it's really hard to source the talent we need for the skills that they have. And so, we have no choice but to really think about sort of upskilling, reskilling, and really build the pipeline for the pathways and the people that we need in the future, because where we are right now, it's very skewed in terms of where the openings are and the skills that people have.
Great. Love to hear more about the skills that you think are needed going forward. So great discussion on our warm-up question. What I'd like to do now is have each of you share for a few minutes about your key initiatives relative to reskilling for the future of work. And if there's any way you can relate it to the first pillar of giving back to society, philanthropy, corporate social responsibility, and corporate volunteering, that would be great. But we're interested in everything you're doing. So I'm going to start with you, Leslie, and we'd love to hear from you.
Great. So I think of the three of us, we probably have the least at the Department of Labor in terms of really of providing carrots or encouragement to business. To do those three things: the corporate social responsibility and philanthropy. However, I do think that we are starting to really take a look a lot more at engaging with business. And I think Puri's work, Curry Gatling, who's the chief of our sector partnerships, we started with manufacturing and are moving into 3 new sectors. It's a statewide initiative. And it also aligns really well with the work that's happening in a number of other agencies. So those agencies being, higher education, the nonprofit the Council of Community Colleges, EDA, our Economic Development Authority. And so we've just begun talks, honestly, to get ourselves together, and it might ramp up pretty quickly, where we all align in how we work with business to engage them in a meaningful way around aligning our programs and our activities with their demands. I love to say, you know, when people ask me, why do you work with employers? It's the Willie Sutton answer. You know, that's where the money is. That's where the jobs are. And unless we really understand and engage in a relationship with employers, not transactional, you know, transactions with employers, but relational, kind of ongoing interaction with business, I don't really believe that we're going to get anywhere. So that's one. Another one is thanks so much for putting up that future of work. And I think a complement to what you've done is also, you know, in that future of work bibliography is the policy and practice website. And I can paste that into the chat when I'm done, that the governor's office put together. So it's a really nice supplement to what you've put together here. The three pillars of the governor's task force are around, and I'm going to really not do a great service to it because I'm going to try to be brief, are around lifelong learning, health and safety for workers, and rights and benefits for workers. So, you know, there's definitely a lot more room around all the themes that we have and that you've raised, but those are the three pillars right now. And what that future of work task force is working on now, aside from about to be putting out a really comprehensive report, I've read early drafts. I can't wait till it's public because I think it's really a valuable contribution to an already very crowded field, as we know. In addition to that, they're starting the Future of Work Accelerator. So I would encourage people to go to that website and take a look. It's a 9-month program. It's kind of wide open for, you know, just about any initiative, small or large, private or public sector, that's around one of those three themes. And the initiatives could be just in conceptual phase, or I will, Maria, I'll put that website up in just a minute. It could be just in the conceptual phase, or it could be those projects that you might want to propose and have supported by this Future of Work Accelerator might be shovel ready. Or you might actually have them going, you know, an initiative going somewhere else in the country and you want to scale to New Jersey or move to New Jersey. So if there are solutions to the problems that they've sort of outlined on the Future of Work website, and you know, you have some ideas as a corporate partner or a university partner, I really encourage you to get involved. I think it's a very exciting initiative. And last but not least, the work that I'm going to plug, the work that I'm doing with Javier, which is we've got a number of pieces. It's not just Javier, but it's also with the Heldrick Center, a number of pieces that are digital assets for workers that'll help workers be able to find a job. I mean, that's, you know, the JOB is always very important, but B, to be able to assess training that might help them find a job that's available. And I think what we're talking about is really knitting those assets together with additional career pathway materials, eligibility tools, and partnerships. You know, let's not just, you know, say this is all digital. This is going to be all backed by partnerships where we would actually have a worker-facing, you know, digital face of the government, although it may not appear to be the government, but to all workers of New Jersey, not just the ones who are in the public workforce system.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. And just to respond, we have posted the Office of Innovation Work Accelerator. We have those documents, multiple documents there under the New Jersey government documents. Okay, that was incredible. A lot of stuff, and I'm really excited to hear you're going to be working to align with business. So we're happy to be your collaborator in that regard. Thank you. How about Ram, would you like to go next and tell us about your initiatives?
Sure. EY, I think there is a bold initiative. It's a global level. It's called EY Ripples. Ripples is to help people, you know, make a greater social impact by providing EY folks, you know, leverage the skills, knowledge, and experience each of the professionals have to positively impact the lives of millions of individuals across the world. And this is a bold initiatives. EY ripples by numbers goes something by, by 2022, we would like to impact, at least mobilize people, not just EYians, but the other ecosystem, about 1 million people to mobilize by 2022. And then by about the same time, like 2022 or 23, futures of millions of people. It's aimed at like 10 million people. So each one impacts, it's like a ripple that we're trying to create about 10 million. And the bold ambition is 1 billion people by 2030. I mean, these are, good one place, it comes in a sheet. But the idea is very good from a perspective that we have various aspects to it. I'll focus on some of the reskilling ones, the career, like, for example, accounting careers. So how do we reskill some of those areas? And how do we bring in DEI into this mix and that equity? And each of the EY professionals could jump in on an initiative to start training some of the folks who may not have the platform. So the EY Ripples connects those professionals with the interest and the society where, or the community where there is a need for this. And then we also had an example of one of them is, we call it WeFi. It's not Wi-Fi, it's Women, WEFI, Women Entrepreneurs Finance Initiative. So bringing women there and then training on the financial initiatives. So that was started with some of the organizations, including World Bank. So just to name one of those, I am part of one of the initiatives where we do college students in terms of the skilling, bring in the junior and seniors in colleges to see what are their next level of experiences. So I'm going a little tactical here, to show some of the skills that is happening. And I think it is the ripple that we are trying to cause and, bring that corporate social responsibility into the mix. I'll pause there, but I think Leslie mentioned a lot of those initiatives, especially the Future of Work Accelerator, where we are working on specific areas. How do we, from our client perspective, how do we reskill? What are the training plans that needs to come through, and not just looking, getting out of this pandemic, but leveraging this as a catalyst to draw that platform, and then bring that strategic workforce planning into this mix. I mean, it's a broader play. You're creating these pipelines in the appropriate reskilling areas.
That's awesome to hear about a 1 billion people initiative by 2030. I love it.
Yeah.
And anything you can send us so we can post a little more about those initiatives, that would be
I will send you that.
Really interested. Thank you. Okay, how about Anne? Would you tell us about what you're working on at Samsung?
Sure. So the future of work and reskilling is a big topic for us as a global company, especially because the world of technology evolves so quickly. It's something that we're constantly thinking about how to invest and how to build the pipeline, because so many of the technologies that will be used in 5 years don't really exist today. And one of the things that we've seen globally is that there is interest in, a lot of the tech fields, like software engineering is really popular, for example. But what schools are producing and what we need from a capability standpoint to enter and join the company sometimes has a gap. And so we are working very closely with universities and other sectors in the world of education to really make sure we're bridging that better. And so one of the things that we've done is built curriculum really around topics that are maybe not taught so classically in schools, like artificial intelligence or the Internet of Things. These are features and capabilities in our technology that are put into the products of today and tomorrow. So we are trying to build curriculum from our perspective, from the industry perspective, to help both from reskilling, but really giving the set of educational requirements that are necessary to actually take the job today. I think that's really important to bridge that gap of what, to make sure that we have the talent that are ready today. The second thing we're doing is really in the world of where I am in corporate citizenship is taking those educational tools, that curriculum that we've built, make sure that it's accessible to many. There are, for example, in the space of artificial intelligence, billion-dollar new colleges within major technical universities that are going to produce AI experts. But, AI is actually accessible in a lot of fields, just like STEM. STEM has, PhDs and experts, but, can enter with an associate's degree. And so what we're trying to do is really create openings with the right curriculum, both by building them in accessible ways, but actually sharing it and disseminating it for students to access so that they can learn these and get entry-level jobs in these fields that seem inaccessible to many. And so we are working, all around the world, we've worked with universities, we've worked with, community colleges, county colleges, and we've worked with different sectors so that we can provide this information in ways that wouldn't be traditionally available or easily available. Today, all of our programming is free. And we are now exploring actually giving students a stipend to be part of the program as well. And that was an important insight we learned both in the US and others. For many of these students who are really eager to enter the field, the time that they're spending in the program is time away from a job that they need, the income of today. And so we don't want to have them make those choices between, do I take my job of today that gives me a paycheck on Friday versus, investing in my future, which might take 6, 9 months and maybe a year. And, as a company, we've spent a lot of time to listen to where those barriers are to entry and making sure that when we are giving programs, it's great that the program is free. And, there are universities charging 100, 200, 300,000 for their education, but there's more to it. And so if we want to level the playing field and make it more inclusive as a community, we have to think about all the factors that are barriers to entry, some that are explicit, like, it costs that much to go to these colleges, but also what are the barriers to keep them from spending the time to be in our program. And so we think that's really important to understand all the factors involved. And even, we have students, we're about to pilot a program this fall who may have some but not all of the prerequisites to be ready to get skilled in an area like artificial intelligence. And how do we help them get there? Because they could be sort of one subject area short of where they need to be, but the potential, once they have that, how do we help that? And so we're really thinking about those bridging models as well. And I think it's great from our side. We're working very closely with learning and development and other parts of the company. And we think that integrated approach is really important because we as a company also have different skill sets. We lead it from corporate citizenship because we do believe in this idea of enabling people and communities. And I think that allows us to make the investments beyond just like the building of curriculum, but make sure it gets disseminated in a way to communities that may not have access to before, but understand the communities and sort of have those important factors be considered, like a stipend, which I think if we just put the program out there might be great, but isn't getting everyone who wants to be in the program there.
Gia, can I add one more quick thing?
Sure. Yeah.
Into that one of the initiatives that I'm part of and EY is focused on is around the neurodiverse centers of excellence. So we would like to bring, make the working population, especially folks with autism and some neurodiverse cognitive abilities. So I think we are focused on those talents, and we have about, we've already recruited about 200, 250 people in the States. That is taking off very well. I mean, to see some of the skills that is coming along those areas is phenomenal. And to Anne's point, I think the AI, that's what triggered me. I mean, that is very focused on the artificial intelligence and some machine learning areas where we are seeing some great skills. And it not only permits that diversity, inclusiveness of various professionals, and the cognitive diversity that comes along with this is amazing.
That's incredible. So yeah, I've seen some amazing stories about people on the autism spectrum and how they're working and doing unbelievably phenomenal things that they were so left out. Thank you, Anne, and everyone. That was fabulous. So I want to take some questions from the larger group, but first I just wanted to ask one more question about the challenges. Some of you mentioned some of the greatest challenges we're facing in getting workers reskilled for the future. Do you have any thoughts on those and anything that you haven't already mentioned relative to how those challenges can be addressed?
Yeah, it's always easier to talk about the challenges than the solutions, isn't it? So at least for me, I know it's easy to find as an analyst the things that are difficult. So I think, the one thing that I was pointing out before, I just want to kind of bring back and loop back, because the skills that are in demand are not just, more skills, they're qualitatively different. And so there is a shift going on. And it's sometimes not that easy for students to adapt, or that quick for students to adapt, and they may not be obvious. So I think making those linkages, if there's a way for us to think about to help students who are far away from the skill level or the skills that they need for a desired job, to be able to make that. And I really loved what Anne had to say about the stipends, because while you're learning, that also means that there's an opportunity cost, right? So you're not just getting free training is great. And I'm so thrilled that, in New Jersey, we have so many options for lower income students, like our opportunity grant for community colleges, and the TAG, which is really the richest state student finance program in the country. And we just, I think we just are about to come to a decision on contracting a new program that is a somewhat more progressive version of career impact bonds. So it'll be no interest loans. So no interest loans that will support short-term training. And it will be a very nice complement to the individual training accounts we have and the community college opportunity grant. The other thing that I think is really super important is the nimbleness or flexibility, adaptiveness of educational institutions. I think at the degree level, all of you know how long it takes to get the state to approve new programs or to be able to change programs in a really substantive way. Shorter term education, non-degree programs, the problem with them is that they don't articulate necessarily with that, if they don't have credit. So you need to be able to articulate them to credit. But if you've got this shortening shelf life of skills, that means there's a need to be able to hop in and get the skills from a student or a worker point of view. And there's a need for the colleges to adapt. And that adaptability is pretty key. I think, this is, again, the Willie Sutton quote that that we always use is the colleges, I think there used to be a big divide between vocational education and academic. And we're happily coming to a paradigm shift, a complete paradigm shift, where I think more and more academics are understanding that, it's great to get the great education, but you also have to get a job when you're out, when you're done. And it's only part of being a full human being, but it's a very important part. And so aligning with demand and understanding deeply what demand is by, again, relationships with business is really, really critical. So that would be my 2 cents.
Excellent. Thank you. Ram or Anne, about the challenges that you see and how we might address them, if you haven't already mentioned.
Yeah, one thing I would say, I think the nimbleness of education institution is what I caught from Leslie. That's so powerful. Probably there is a transition already happening to a skill-based learning. I mean, the degrees are, sometimes. So I was, working on a paper, on the side to talk about how high school students could get a benefit of interning, internships. So these internships are, if you look at, it's probably less than 5% or 10% of the students might go into some kind of internships or summer jobs and get some flavor to this. But if this is facilitated at the either at the high school, like senior, junior, senior level, or even the initial freshman level of the college, to provide that exposure to various trades and skills available. And this is happening only probably at, folks at, who cannot afford to this or who don't have exposure. They are at a loss. I think from an equity perspective, I think the schools could come in and bring this kind of apprenticeship model or the internships available to majority of the students. So that's one of the solutions I would like to highlight.
Excellent, thank you. Anne, did you want to add anything?
Sure. No, I just think the closer that academic institutions and businesses are, really, I think, Ram, you had a great point about internships and just the information, right? Or the asks, I think that the better we are to bridge, the more streamlined the pipeline is. And I think that companies sometimes also have to lean in. We've been encouraging our employees to go and train in the skills that are needed because, and share curriculum that we would love people to teach. In a lot of the new technical fields, colleges across the country are not experts in something like AI, right? So we actually have to go and teach the educators, the professors on how to teach this integrated approach rather than separate subject areas, because we're just looking at skills in a different way. And I think that, forums like this and just partnerships between industry and academic institutions are that hurdle. It takes some effort, but I think that the closer we are, the less there are sort of gaps where people might not be job ready.
Absolutely. I can't resist just mentioning that Rutgers is trying to be much more flexible and nimble through our new Rutgers Stackable Business Innovation Certificate Program, where people actually don't have to matriculate and they can take lots of different courses, including some in the digital world and AI, et cetera. And I'm put together a certificate program in corporate social innovation, which consists of 3 courses, and then people get a certificate and they can take it at their own pace. And it's a whole real new model. It's just launched. So we have a couple of minutes, about 5 minutes for some more questions. So who has a question? You can put it in the chat. I know you've been chatting away, everybody. Or just let me know that you want to ask a question. What questions do you have? Let's see, maybe we could raise hands or something. Yeah, we could do that. I'll go to participants. So who has a question?
Linda raised her hand, and I believe Maria just put a question in the chat as well.
Okay, Linda, ask your question.
Yeah, I put it in the chat, but let me form it as a question here. And that is that I'm in Western Massachusetts in the Berkshires, and we have the population who is underemployed, unemployed in jobs that do not have career paths and would want to participate. We're having trouble reaching these people because the communications with the primarily cell phones, smartphones, is fragmented. Nobody's reading a newspaper. They don't go to the websites. And I'm constantly trying to figure out, how do we reach people who would be really good at some of these jobs, would love it, and just aren't getting the information at all. So I'm looking for brainstorming, or looking for ideas, and I'm sure that there are other places that are having this same kind of an issue. Oh, TikTok. Yeah, we haven't done that. That's a good idea, Leslie. Yes.
Anne, did you want to say anything about that?
Sure. Just as a side point, I put a little comment there. I heard a quick story on NPR yesterday morning about the footprint of libraries, right? And reinventing what that space is, I think, is a great platform. I've seen so many, libraries redefine themselves as maker spaces, and really trying to find their reason for being as everything becomes digital. And there are 15,000 libraries across the country in many communities. that is such a core resource that could be the great place for job training, could be a great place for virtual learning, distance learning, and all of these mediums if they are constrained by technology and their home libraries have great setups and a lot of communities be able to do that. And I think that, industry as well, but a lot of other sectors can do a lot in sort of reviving what is already a physical footprint in communities across the country to help skill the workforce as well as educate young people.
Excellent. Okay, it's 11 o'clock. I want to move into the breakouts now, and Deborah's going to explain what to do. We have 3 breakout groups, as you can see here. Group 1 is going to be facilitated by John Sarno, and that's going to focus specifically on the portable individual training accounts that we've been talking about. And we just had a wonderful conversation about technology, and so I hope some of you will join Sam's group talking about specifically technology's role in making reskilling accessible and equitable. And as I mentioned, I'll be leading the one on what are the skills? How do we define the skills needed for the future of work, which I'm fascinated, and I'll share a little bit about what some of the research that some of you may have looked at or not is about, and how we go about defining those skills. Sort of, I'm looking for a process. So Deborah, you want to explain how people are going to sign up and join a group?
Sure. So those who had emailed us previously asking to be assigned to one of the groups, we're going to assign you to the group that you had expressed interest in. For those who did not let us know ahead of time which group you preferred, we are going to open all of the rooms and you will be able to choose whichever room that you want to go into. We're going to give you about 1 to 2 minutes to join the group. If in that time period you do not join, we will just end up randomly assigning you to one of the groups.
Great. Okay. Any questions about that? We're ready to go. All right, let's go.
Our groups, but we got cut off in mid-sentence. I think I got the gist of what Gary was saying.
Yeah, John, what I was going to say is that we have to look at the practicality of it, where that pilot goes. If it goes to a handful of companies that you already know is going to be successful, what are you changing?
A great observation. Whoa, Gina, woo.
Had a good conversation. All right, so each of the 3 groups, we have about a half hour left total. And so we can have readouts from the 3 groups and including discussion of all 3 of everything. So I know we had a really robust conversation in group 3. Do you have somebody to report out in your group, John, on the portable individual training accounts?
I'll report out.
Okay.
So in the limited amount of time we had, obviously we had to try to be laser focused. And we had a very good, relatively small group of 6 people, but a representative of both business, industry, policy, academic, and practitioners. So I think that miraculously, the representation of the group really lent itself to a very focused discussion, which is what we really needed in 30 minutes, right? So what can you do in 30 minutes? We tried to be as practical as possible. We know that it's an initiative that can be brought to fruition. When you go on the Office on Innovation, New Jersey Office on Innovation's site, it's there in black and white. The lifelong learning account is there as being a front and center initiative that the state of New Jersey is willing to at least consider seriously. And then we know that there is, $5 million appropriated for a pilot. So I'm hoping that we're sort of beyond the conceptual academic discussions. And that's why I really wanted to try to focus on as much practical advice or practical implication as possible. Given that, with that said, we looked at supply and demand. I think the first issue is there a demand for this? We had a description of what Audible is doing, and we know what the delivery systems are in New Jersey, and we know what the ecosystem is and what people are doing. So, what is the demand? Do employers want it? What is there an appetite for business and industry to even want to do this? Because look at what they're doing now and look at the gaps now. So, what is it that this is really going to achieve if there is no demand for the product? So I think one of our recommendations to the folks who are working on this is, let's go, let's measure it to see whether there's demand for this. Get out of your office and start talking to folks who are willing to, make a contribution, which are going to be business and employers. So you're going to have to do some focus groups, and you're going to have to do some surveys to see whether there is even any interest on the employer's end. Now, it could be that there's no interest at all, which is fine, because then there's the worker. And you have to ask yourself the question, why even have the employer involved? Because once you're going to put employer money into that, there's going to be a proprietary interest, and there's going to be an ROI that the employer wants to get. So this is not a recommendation. This is just a question, an ownership question. Who gets to own the account? That's a critical question because that will determine how it gets spent and what's the outcome. So it could be one model is just let the employee open up their account, and then the employer could or couldn't contribute to it. And then you have issues of equity, because not everybody's going to be able to afford, right? If you're looking at kind of an IRA concept or a quasi 401k concept, we know that there's people who can't make a contribution because they don't make enough money. So, that gets us to the other great challenge here, is that there are folks, the people who are in most need are the least likely to get it. So it could be that $5 million is used to actually fund the accounts for people who, or at least in whole or in part, to fund the accounts for people who are not able to fund it on their own. So again, we're talking about 3 different models here, right? In effect, potential models, where both the employer, employee, and a government subsidy creates the account, or whether it's strictly private sector, or whether it's just the employee and with a government subsidy. And then the other, so the recommendation then is to start doing some research. And I know you got some good people over at Heldridge, Rutgers, and others who I'm sure are on top of this to determine whether what the supply issues are and what the demand issues are. And then finally, if you're not willing to, I don't know whether there is a likelihood that the state of New Jersey can innovate this. Because when you're using public money, you know, that creates certain obligations that, you know, you would not otherwise have if it were private sector funding, right? That's the deal. So, you know, I don't know whether the state of New Jersey can actually innovate in this space, but if it can, then the question is, you know, why? If you can't change or incrementally change a system that is not working well, then, you know, the question is whether it's worth the effort. So these are some of the questions and some of the challenges that would confront the people who are planning a pilot on this.
Do you want to take a couple of questions and then we'll move on to the second and third group?
Be happy to.
Okay. Anybody just want to raise your hand? If you have a comment or a question, I thought that was a very interesting summary of the questions that research would have to answer relative to the supply and demand, if people even understood what it was that we're talking about. Is there anyone from the DOL that wants to respond to that last point about can DOL or the government really innovate in this space?
Well, don't know until they're able to determine the need.
I would just like to add, I think John is right on point with public funds are tied to things, right? That you just can't go out there and do what you want to do. And that would be a hindrance. And if you really want to innovate, you have to make space for this to be innovative, right? Not just in word, but like there's actual, actionable things behind it. And I wonder, there always seems to be a smaller funds available that allow you to do some things that are innovative. And I don't know, how much that is, but I wonder if it would be possible to find out exactly how far we can go in order, to make this happen. Because you're right, if just in name only, we're going to be back in the same boat doing what we've always done, the way we've always done it. And if you skip over us, if you skip over the government, maybe it would be better to just have the business and the individual to work cooperatively. So I just, you just make a great point, John, that do we really have, I think you used the terminology, the political will to get this done. And you would hope so. You would hope so.
But what is the $5 million for, if not to do, I thought it's to do a pilot in this space.
It is. We don't really know. We don't, I don't, the private sector, those of us in the private sector don't have access to the inter-office memos that are going back and forth, but, and I'm sure that's proprietary at this point. But it could be for research, it could be other things, it could be for measurement.
Right.
I think a big part of it has to do with selection. To me, a pilot has to be built to succeed, and that means that there's who are the players, who makes it succeed, and that's about selecting the right participants. And see, this is the issue, Carrie. If this could be done, if the innovators, whoever they are, could select the participants, both the employers and the workers, then I think there's a shot that this thing can be transformative. So we can talk about that. I got a feeling that whoever the working group is not even there yet. I mean, it's just a gut feeling I have. But to me, it's all about selection. And if you can get the participants, then you can build the program around those for success. And then maybe as long as there's accountability for how that government money is used, I think that's not a problem. It's not a problem at all.
Okay, I suggest that we set up a side conversation to drill more into these with the critical players at the DOL, et cetera. And so invite people who are potential pilot participants, and talk about, and if this funding can be used for research, I mean, that's what I see is needed is research, a good pilot study. And
we don't want to give it to the academics, Gina. They have enough. You got enough.
All right, so we're going to move on to the second group now in the interest of time. Thank you, John.
Right,
Sam, who do you have to share what you talked about?
Arturo is going to represent our group.
And I'll do my best to be brief. As it's been said, academics tend to talk a lot. So we were guided through 3 questions. We have a very dynamic conversation, and the questions were concatenated. So Sam was an excellent timekeeper and helped us to flow through the conversation. So the questions were, what is working in terms of technology for training? What is the future of work technology? And how do we measure that future? So in this context, in the first question, what is working, we thought of solutions that currently are working and challenges to move new solutions into place or move them forward. So when we talk about solutions, we talk about online platforms that are already out there. We talk about Coursera. We talk about corporations where all and every single one of these opportunities are available to everybody within the organization. And we talk about how these opportunities can help people to move through the ranks or have lateral movements or preserving jobs. Conversely, we talk about the challenges. Some of the challenges were how much do you need in person and how much the person-to-person training has been replaced by technology and how much can it be done in that way. Second is these online platforms, they are limited to the number of languages that they are being available. So people who may not be fluent in that language may not have access to the platform. We also talk about the type of platform and the technology. So there is a presumption of technology that need to be on hand for people to access this learning. So how do we bridge that technological gap is number one. Number two is how do we bridge the cultural gap when technology versus in-person is needed. Number three is how do we make sure that the content that is available is the adequate content. Other challenge that we also considered was about accessibility. And that was Sharon's doing, that was a Pandora's box. And we use this as a pivotal point to understand what do we mean by accessibility. We talk about 4 points. We talk about body accessibility, as in how do we consider to be an able body, as in hearing, visual, all the natural given by law. But also we talk about technology accessibility. We talk about economic accessibility. Can I afford the training on myself? Can the company afford me being trained? How do we build those working hours when I've been trained for the purpose of a company? So social, economic, body, and social was the last one. So social as in, is my living lifestyle allowing me to access that technology, that training? Am I a parent that I have childbearing responsibilities or household responsibilities that prevent me from accessing training as it happens? So the 4 places of accessibility that we consider were social, economic, technology, and embodiment. So That is one of the issues that we look into. When we look at what is working or not working, the conversation pivot again into how do we know that it's working or not. So when we look at success, we need to define how do we call success as in the person learning, success as in the material that we need to be available, it is available, and can people signal their learning and their ability to do the stuff. So future of work technology meant how fast can we learn and how well can we learn, and if what we can learn is what we need to learn. That was in the context as well of artificial intelligence. And we have a conversation about how do we open the black box so people can participate in this conversation. There was an issue of how do we capture the data so we know that we have the data for artificial intelligence. So some part of training on capturing data, some training on archiving the data, cleaning the data, some training on using, processing, analyzing the data, and some training on making the outcomes of the analysis available. There was a comment from Xavier about it will be good in the future. In the present, there are some handicaps on artificial intelligence. In particular, we talk about business practices of hiring, recruitment using artificial intelligence, that they have some implicit bias. So how do we make sure that artificial intelligence don't just magnify our biases? We talk about then that it's not only about technology training, but it's also about social training and empathic training, where we want to replicate and enhance our ability to be human, not just restricted to our ability to program a model for repeating decisions. And so finally, we went back to the last point that it was, how do we measure? And when we talk about measure, is how do we measure that people learn what they need to learn? How do we measure that is being taught what needs to be taught? And how do we measure that people can advise that they do what they need to do? So we talk about access. Can everybody access? Again, we talk about turn-on rates. We know that people is coming into a system, but can we know who is successfully completing the system? We talk about the classic tragedy of the commons conundrum. What if I train them and they leave? To which the answer is, what happens if I don't train them and they stay? So companies are afraid to train because employees may become more marketable to go other places. So the money for training becomes a loss for the company. But if the company don't train the employees that get the stake with the company might become dated. So there was a conversation about collective effort where companies will talk to each other to train. And again, there was the question became, how do we make sure that there is some praxis to unify knowledge, coding of wording, typology of knowledge? So when you train a person in one company, when there's a training in one particular area, that can translate to other spaces. So an issues of collective action among companies to make sure that these credentials are transferable across, not only within ranks in the company, but within the industry. That was as well what it was brought, and that was brought as part of the challenge. And finally, linked to it is how do we encourage companies to share content? Most of the knowledge has become a proprietary issue, a competitive advantage. When you train employees, you are making them aware of what they know, and people who may hire your employees may have access to your knowledge and will erode your competitive advantage. And that was it.
Arturo, you never cease to amaze me. That was quite a lot that you talked about in 30 minutes. That's amazing. I hope we have it recorded, so we'll capture it in notes. And if you want to share your notes, that was amazing. So I don't think we have time for questions, unfortunately, right now, but because we want to have time for the third readout on the group that I facilitated on defining the skills needed for the future of work. And Edith Orenstein is going to share what we talked about.
Thanks, Professor Wartenberg. So realizing there's not a lot of time left, I think at a very high level, breakout group 3 on defining the skills needed for the future of work. We talked about there's various surveys out there with maybe hundreds of types of skills identified, but our group basically said let's really narrow it down. Let's maybe take a New Jersey-based focus, perhaps survey members of this group or have a survey of employers focusing on what employers are saying they're looking for, and then really to organize that in a way such as a taxonomy by industry, by sector, and then those skills applicable to industries and sectors, and to really conduct that research ourselves. And there were also suggestions about reaching out to chambers of commerce, state chamber of commerce, and in particular also some affinity group type chambers of commerce as well, African American Chamber of Commerce, Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. And, you know, there was a lot more discussion, but again, just to be brief, one hands-on example that was given in our group was Audible, which made a conscious effort to locate its headquarters in Newark and has 8-week training programs for members of the community and addresses issues like lack of technology by some of those folks in Newark, lack of access to internet and so forth. And they've just put into place in Audible, their first cohort of folks that they've trained through this program as an example that perhaps could be replicated. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Professor.
Well, we will capture it in the notes because we're almost out of time, but great job. Yeah, I have a lot of notes as well. And I thought it was a very rich discussion around partnering around the skills. I have tremendous interest in this area, so we're definitely going to be moving forward with that. For next steps, what we're going to do, we do not have a meeting in August. The next meeting, everybody put it on your calendar. You should have already a calendar invite to hold. It's going to be, again, Wednesday, 10 to 12, September 15th, and then October 27th, November 17th, and December 15th. The next meeting, we're going to try to integrate with our second pillar of around shared value. How do we create shared value for society and business? We're going to talk about purpose-driven leadership, B Corps, and ultimately talk about aligning purpose and profit in organizations through that lens. And we will continue the conversation on these three themes. I think that we've landed on something that's workable to form sort of subgroups focused on the portable individual training counts, the technology, and the skills, and as it comes together. So thank you, everyone. And I would love to just get you to chat or share any comments on this meeting, anything that you thought was particularly good, or maybe something you'd like to see done differently. You can also send RICSI director, which is Deborah, and I, your comments. And we will send out the notes, we will send out the recording, we will do all that and keep the conversation going, which I thought was incredibly rich and valuable. Thank you so much. Any thoughts, comments? You can put it in the chat. Great meeting, insights, and excellent facilitation. Thank you. Okay. Any other comments or questions from anyone?
Gina, can I share one point as we move to wrap?
Go ahead, Sam.
You know, Xavier was in our group, and I shared this with our breakout room. He made a comment that I wrote down that really hit home. He said, organizations have to have the courage to share content that goes beyond their organization and the people that they work for. I just want to compliment this group, because this collective and what we're doing moving forward is about the same thing. Us all sharing beyond our own communities and scopes of influence in organizations, public, private, to help more people. So I just wanted to share that. That was one of my big takeaways today.
Great, thank you. So we are all about collaboration, and we want to model what we are preaching. We're also about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I truly believe that, and we know from research, but I truly believe through my life that when people share openly and contribute in the common interest of something larger than themselves, that's really where the meaning of life is. And we have that great opportunity here. So I'm incredibly grateful for each and every one of your participation and all of your contributions. Thank you. We have 2 minutes left. Who else would like to say something?
So I had a quick question. Do we have any plans for conducting a survey with this group or an extended group from this group, like, Make It Nuclear on this topic to prioritize some of the topics that we have, such as competency and some of the portable training accounts?
Well, I heard that come loud and clear in literally all three groups as one of the next steps that we can consider.
Perfect.
Definitely research, focus groups, I heard, surveys, ranking, all sorts. We have to think that through. So that's sort of one of the things that came out. So just again, we're going to close the this particular sequence of meetings with a report, which will be done in December by the end of the year with recommendations about what exactly we should be doing. And then maybe we'll look for funding for research, et cetera, et cetera. So to pull all this together. So you guys are the thought leaders and the pioneers in this space. If there are things that we can jumpstart in the meantime, all the better. But I think we're doing some really good work to think together and share our work, share our thoughts, collaborate, and work together as pioneers in this space to literally be recreating and creating a future that works for everyone.
Yep.
Okay, it's 12 o'clock and I want to thank everybody. I hope you had a good meeting and a great day, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.